In 2021, NASA awarded SpaceX a grant for $3 billion to build a human landing system for the moon based on the Starship. SpaceX's submission said they would be making the first unmanned landing on the moon in the first quarter of 2024. That's in about 3 months from now. Yeah, let's see what progress SpaceX has made for $3 billion of taxpayers' money. Wow, 30-odd engines burning. That's the first time SpaceX has had that on a rocket in flight. So now we just need another 10 or 20 flights like that, and boom, SpaceX can achieve its mission of getting back to the moon in the next 3 months. Look, the rocket's made it to staging, which looked very impressive. Now all they got to do is get it back without blowing up like the last one, and oh, never mind.
Hopefully we don't lose it. Hopefully we don't lose any boosters, because that's a lot of engines. Our initial booster flights will just have maybe 2 to 4 engines. Not 28. 28 is a lot of engines.
It's showtime.
Now, 100%, this wasn't the flight termination system. This was 100% unplanned. Now, there is lag between the actual video footage and what the booster's telemetry is saying, so I've synced it back up here. And what you see is that when they initially try to relight the engines to boost back, about a third of them don't light back up. In fact, some of them have clearly failed already, and you can see propellant or something streaming out the left-hand side of the craft. Then there's a few very energetic failures of engines, which now means we're spewing out propellant on an oxidizer on the near side. Then there is a pogo event, which creates a liquid hammer that smashes the common dome between the fuel and the oxidizer. And after that, you just need a single ignition source and you have a colossal flying bomb. I should stress, rockets don't actually normally blow up. I don't mean that in a funny way. I mean, it's just that rockets are basically giant flying silos full of oxidizer and fuel. So what usually happens is the silo ruptures and all the fuel spills out. For an explosion like this, you actually need the fuel and the oxidizer to have mixed somewhere not in the engines. And that's actually quite rare, unless, of course, you have SpaceX, when it's going to happen a few minutes later.
Probably improve the hardware itself for the next flight.
Gosh, that looks kind of familiar. Yeah, so that was the craft blowing up at about the 8-minute, 10-second mark. And we'll stick with the SpaceX feed, because it wouldn't be a SpaceX launch without loads of idiots cheering like morons after their spacecraft has just blown up.
They're standing by for a call out here. Coming up on the projected time that ship would shut down its engines.
As you can tell by the excitement from the crowd here at Mission Control Center in Hawthorne. There's a great view of our Star Command Center. That's our control center at Starbase Texas. The crowd here, Mission Control Center behind us in Hawthorne. Everyone is super exciting. What a successful day this has been so far.
Now, to me, it looked like it blew up. But, of course, the people in Mission Control have access to all of the data, so they'll know instantly what's going on with their spacecraft, because all the telemetry they're going to be getting from it.
And I mean, up to this point, major successful milestones through hot staging, which was the big objective today. So we are going to head into the coast phase, planned for the next about hour and 5 minutes. We'll be returning around the T+1 hour and 15-minute mark. And that's while we're waiting for Starship to continue on to its next step for reentry. We're not totally sure what video we're going to get, and that video comes normally by overflying ground stations, but we don't have a ton along our flight path. So fingers crossed that we will get some via Starlink on this mission, since we're testing that out.
Well, they're idiots. Starlink is essentially routers in low Earth orbit. practical upshot is it's only good within a few hundred miles of an uplink tower. Now let's see how many uplink towers they're going to go within a few hundred miles of on their planned route, shall we?
But we are experimenting with Starlink on both the booster and ship on this mission, which will be communicating with our satellites in orbit to see if we can get that data.
Yeah, if they really wanted to do satellite communication, they would have been better off with a geostationary satellite, because Starlink is supremely poorly equipped to do this sort of communication. Meanwhile, about 2 minutes after the spacecraft blew up, SpaceX is starting to ask questions like, why is my radar signal suddenly getting very broad and diffuse?
And also give us a moment. We are hearing some chatter on the net, so we're going to try to parse that for you.
Meanwhile, about 3 minutes after it's blown up, they're still sort of trying to work out, do we have a spacecraft still?
John Innsbrucker back here in Hawthorne at our webcast desk. We have lost the data from the second stage. We had heard a call out that we were internal guidance, which means we were getting near the end of the approximately 6-minute burn of Starship. But we haven't gotten any more data since then, so we think we may have lost the second stage. So we would not be into coast phase. We wouldn't be able to come back in an hour or so and possibly get ready for reentry. However, what we do know right now is we had an on-time launch at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, and about 10 minutes later, it was $1 billion of wreckage raining down on the Gulf of Mexico. Now, we'll come on to how these things cost $1 billion a pop later. But yeah, it was a great improvement over the first flight in that rather than taking 4 minutes to turn a rocket into $1 billion of wreckage, it took 8 minutes. And as any SpaceX fan will tell you, that's an impressive amount of progress for $2 billion.
Now, even though we aren't planning recovery, the telemetry and data that we receive all the way to the end of today's mission is really what we're looking for.
Guys, the simplest telemetry you can get from a spacecraft is, has it blown up or not? And it took you over 3 minutes to work out that it had actually blown up 3 minutes earlier. But hey, didn't Starship at least do better than expected? Well, yeah, kinda. In part due to exceptionally low standards like success is clearing the tower, which was literally their success standards for their first test flight.
No, I think I'm just like I said, I really want to lower expectations as much as possible here, and use as an example the Soviet N-1. Like, that's why I prefaced it by saying that the Soviet rocket engineers, which really was the entire Warsaw Pact, frankly.
Yes, this is Elon Musk comparing his revolutionary rocket to something designed in the Soviet Union with slide rules.
Their combined capabilities still resulted in failure despite maximum motivation, and they were the A-team. So just please set your expectations appropriately. That is what success is not what should be expected tomorrow. That would be insane.
Spinning, but I do want to remind everyone that everything after clearing the tower was icing on the cake.
Now, I'll be the first to admit, based on the data that I had previously seen, I expected a second rerun that would go very much like the first, with sort of engine failures going out all over the place. And I've got to give credit where it's due. They got all of the engines burning, which was an impressive feat of engineering. But in the same breath, let's be realistic about this. We sent 10 odd rockets to the moon flawlessly 50 years ago, and the absolute chasm between this and the functional system that was promised. You know, where the actual true believers think Elon Musk was going to deliver this.
So SLS, 2 billion per launch, can fly once per year. Starship, 2 million per launch, can fly 3 times per day. So 1,000 times per year. So Starship will be 1 million times, 1,000 times 1,000 more efficient than the SLS.
Yeah, in the 4 or so years since Jixwan and Sebastian put up this video, the SLS did launch their rocket for $2 billion.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
Then did the transfer orbit, then actually went into some super elaborate orbit around the moon, where it actually looked back and gave some nice portraits of the moon and the Earth.
Our engineers, our flight controllers, the chance to really learn about Orion systems in deep space, learn about flying a spacecraft farther than we've ever sent one intended for humans.
SpaceX also spent about $2 billion on Starship in 2023. And after that, meanwhile at SpaceX headquarters, they're still not aware that their rocket blew up a couple of minutes ago.
Humans, we're going beyond anywhere we ever went for Apollo. And so we're in that orbit, test out all of those systems. Eventually we'll do a maneuver to break out of that, do another flyby and come home.
And after all that, they return the capsule safely to Earth, right on the money.
Flight Dynamics reports that Orion is right on the money, coming right down the pike, a good view out of the cabin camera looking out of the upper hatch of Orion.
That's how insane the difference between Starship and SLS is. It really is a factor of 1 freaking million. This was a fun comparison, but it's just insane when we remind ourselves again how much more efficient Starship actually is compared to the Senate launch system, or should I say the Shelby launch system.
But if you scroll the clock back to 2016 when Musk originally announced the Starship, it's got distinct Tesla semi-vibes to it, where the truck was originally going to detect if you're okay and pull over to the side of the road.
Medical emergency, the truck will stay in lane and gradually come to a halt and put on the emergencies. If it doesn't hear a response from you, it will actually call emergency services and get an ambulance. It's going to take care of you, it's going to take care of other cars, it's going to take care of pedestrians. This is a massive increase in safety.
And that was revealed in 2017, and some 5 years on, a barely functioning prototype is rolled out. And of course, that was with Musk being the world's greatest genius on the planet.
At this point, I think I know more about manufacturing than anyone currently alive on Earth.
Incidentally, I should note that all the things that are promised for Starship were originally promised for the Falcon 9.
So is the idea to then recover the top stage or the whole thing, or?
Yeah, long term our goal is to recover the entire rocket and be able to relaunch the whole thing quickly.
Okay.
And with the much simpler system, it still took 5 odd years to get something kind of reliable, and in the end delivered something that could be outperformed cost-wise by a 1970s designed by slide rule disposable Soviet rocket. In 2001 to 2009, you could take a trip to the International Space Station on a Soyuz for about $25 million. Even inflation adjusting that from $2001, the worst case scenario, and taking the upper price limit, that's only about $45 million per seat. Musk has not only used reusable technology to increase that number to some $55 million, but charges NASA almost $90 for it. And yes, SpaceX, space exploration, has never explored beyond low Earth orbit. Look, rockets blowing up is the exception, not the norm. Blowing up rockets represents failure, not success. Having the entire company cheer like idiots when they've just failed makes you look like a hardcore Kool-Aid cult. Having one rocket blow up could be seen as misfortune. Having both rockets blow up, like losing both parents, starts to look a lot like carelessness. Having your rocket blow up and not even knowing that it's happened? Yeah. But if you want to confuse a Musk fan, it's simple. Just ask them, what would failure actually look like? You know, because for them, the rocket blowing up is a great success. Because of all the great telemetry you're going to get from mission control, who still haven't worked out that their rocket blew up over a minute ago. Oddly enough, this is almost exactly what Musk said about the first mission, which spectacularly blew up.
And maybe slightly exceeding my expectations, but roughly what I expected, which was, or hoped for, I should say, which is that we would get clear of the pad with minimal damage to the pad. And I'm glad to report that the pad damage is actually quite small and looks like it can be repaired quickly. And that we would also get significant in-flight data.
That it was a great success from all the great things that they learned, until someone actually asked him what they learned. And there was a long pause.
What's your best guess as to what caused the initial engine issues? And then I guess it cascaded after that, but what do you think happened?
It's not. I think we don't know with certainty. I mean, obviously, the rocket stayed on the launch pad for a while, and
yes, this was SpaceX's assessment after a week of analyzing everything they could.
But this is the SpaceX best assessment after a week. Anyway, so something bad happened at T plus 27 seconds.
Well, $1 billion of government money well spent then. Musk's original projection back in 2016 is they had their new Raptor engine.
We fired it for 100 seconds. It could fire for much longer than 100 seconds. That's just the size of the test tanks. And then the duration of the firing you're seeing right now is about 40 seconds, which is the length of the firing for landing on Mars.
And all they had to do was bolt a load of them together and they'd be landing on Mars, not once, but twice in 2022.
That's not a typo.
Yeah, Musk wasn't just going to land on Mars in 2022, last year, but he was going to confirm water resources and identify hazards and place power, mining, life support infrastructure for future flights. And the year after he was meant to be landing, not only do they not even have a rocket that could make orbit, but they have precisely zero infrastructure for doing all this stuff either. It's not even close. I mean, optimistically, he's achieved 1% of this goal in almost a decade. Another 1,000 years like this, and Musk might actually achieve his 2022 goal.
We will start construction of the first ship around the second quarter of next year, so in about 6 to 9 months, we should start building the first ship. But that's our goal, is to try to make the 2022 Mars rendezvous. So then in 2024, we want to try to fly 4 ships, 2 of which would be crewed, and 2 cargo and 2 crew. The goal of these initial missions is to find the best source of water. That's for the first mission, and then the second mission, the goal is to build the propellant plant.
This is comically delusional. Comically delusional. Look, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide here on Earth is about the same as it is on Mars. And here on Earth, Musk doesn't make methane from carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because it would be ludicrously too expensive. Instead, they dig it out of the ground like everyone else who mines fossil fuel. But now he doesn't want to make a methane-making plant on Earth, but on Mars. And assuming the crew has no requirements, they don't eat any food, they don't breathe any oxygen, or anything like that, he is at best transported 600 tons to Mars. So it's easy. All Musk has to do is demonstrate that he can make a fuel-making plant here on Earth that weighs less than 600 tons. Such that they can chop it up, put it into the rocket, and ship it to Mars. Yeah, that's just plain delusional. I absolutely guarantee you, no one has given this vaporware a first or even a second thought since Musk proposed it in 2016.
So we should, particularly with 6 ships, there have plenty of landed mass to construct the propellant depot, which will consist of a large array of solar panels, very large array, and then everything necessary to mine and refine water, and then draw the CO2 out of the atmosphere, and then create and store deep cryo CH4 and O2.
And if you think I'm being harsh on Elon Musk here by saying he's made zero progress towards getting towards Mars, that also seems to be the very, very slow conclusion of one Elon Musk. In that in 2016 he was predicting that in about 8 years they would be landing people on Mars. And about 5 years later he was asked the exact same question.
When do you think SpaceX will land a human being on Mars?
And the timer is running. Yep, I've not faked this. This was genuinely Musk's response on a problem that he's meant to be dynamically on top of.
Best case is about 5 years. Worst case, 10 years.
Look, even if we were just talking about getting to the moon, how far along are we? Well, first of all, you'd need just to get a flight where you can show you can get the thing up to orbital velocity and get it back again. Incidentally, even if this thing hadn't blown up, it would have never made re-entry because of all the heat tiles that it lost along the way. Then you actually have to show that you can take a payload to space because currently this thing is apparently doing nothing more than getting itself to orbit, with zero payload. Then you need to be able to recover the booster and the Starship, which is where the fun begins, because now you need to be able to refurbish it and launch it again. Then, of course, you need to be able to do the orbital refueling, which, honestly, I don't see as such a great problem, but not the stupid way that Musk seemed to want to do it. But whatever, now you need to be able to get a lunar lander version of Starship. And, according to the government reports, fly well over a dozen missions in rapid succession. Then you need to be able to fire up those Raptors in space, and then refire them again to stop in orbit around the moon. Just so you know, this would be a genuine first. When NASA was doing this thing, they went for pressure-fed engines, for reliability. They went for the whole failure is not an option thing with redundancy. And in the case where you couldn't get redundancy, reliability was king.
It was a solitary single, one chamber. That chamber either ignited properly and got you the thrust or it did not. If it did not, Neil and Buzz were dead on the surface.
Because there was no backup on those. If for any reason those engines didn't work, everyone died. And the most reliable thing that you could use was a pressure-fed engine. Yeah, all of that is gone with Starship. Then they've got to be able to land it and take it off again. Then once you've done all of that, now you've got to take Americans back to the moon. And all of that has to happen by December 2025. At that point, celebrating 30-odd engines lighting up and burning as great progress in November 2023. Seems like getting all giddy over getting a participation trophy. The reality is there is basically zero chance of this merely fulfilling the contract with NASA of landing on the moon by 2025. And I should stress, this was months after the first Artemis mission had not only just flown around the moon, but had returned the capsule safely to Earth. Musk was confident that Starship would be one of the first things ready for the Artemis mission.
Elon, do you expect HLS to be Starship HLS to be the long pole for Artemis 3?
No, I definitely don't. I think we will be the first thing to really be. I think we will be that we will not be a limiting factor at all.
Gosh, if only NASA had looked at one or two of my videos beforehand, they might have realized the difference between the date Musk was very confident of and how it was typically about 10 times over-optimistic. Well, okay, fine. It's just an over-optimistic deadline. Doesn't that mean it's just going to be late rather than never? Well, no. Remember how they rapidly prototyped the Hyperloop into a successful project.
Still sounds pretty complicated, Elon.
It's like a tube with an air hockey table. It's really, I swear it's not that hard.
Oh, no, that's right. It never worked, even slightly, and the Hyperloop they'd built outside SpaceX headquarters was initially cut in half to make way for a functioning form of transport, a railway, before being completely cut up and taken away as scrap metal. Or remember how the hyper-efficient wormhole technology was going to fix traffic.
I mean, you can think of these like wormholes, in like, oh, I need to get to the other side of LA or New York or whatever, drop down the wormhole, pop out the other side.
And in the end, they unveiled a barely functional prototype of slow-moving, chauffeur-driven taxis in tunnels, and the whole thing is basically a novelty zombie thing under Las Vegas.
Anybody brushed a wall yet?
Yeah, there've been a couple people that have.
Well, good. Knock on wood, right? It just seems so close. Kind of crazy.
Entrepreneur Elon Musk has spent his life proving people wrong.
I tried taking some computer classes, but I was way ahead of the teacher, so it didn't really help.
Or how he was going to give the hardcore smackdown to gasoline cars.
The point of doing this is to just give the hardcore smackdown to gasoline cars.
By putting a 1.5-ton battery in a sports car.
620 mile range, that's a 1,000-kilometer range. This will be the first time an electric vehicle breaks 1,000 kilometers. A production electric vehicle will travel more than 1,000 kilometers in a single charge at highway speed.
An idea so stupid that years later, Musk is literally saying on Twitter, we could make a 600-mile electric car, but that would make the product worse, as 99% of the time you're carrying around unneeded battery mass, which makes acceleration, handling, and efficiency worse. It's hard to know which is worse, the moron saying something stupid, or the morons cheering him for saying something stupid.
If you ask people that say, well, I want 600 miles range. I'm like, okay, well, that means most of the time you're hauling around a battery pack you're not going to use, so.
And it'll slow you down. It'll inhibit handling.
Yeah, it's like
the first time an electric vehicle breaks 1,000 kilometers. A production electric vehicle will travel more than 1,000 kilometers in a single charge at highway speed.
Making a non-functional product doesn't mean that you can simply make the product work later. Just ask Theranos.
That iterative approach is a big part of how SpaceX does development, and it's been the basis for all of our major innovations, including those on Falcon, Dragon.
Of course, that iterative design that made the second stage of the Falcon 9 fully reusable. Oh no, that never happened.
But the fundamental revolution with Starship is that it's designed to be a fully, rapidly reusable, reliable rocket.
Yeah. The exact same claim was made about the Falcon 9 over a decade ago. Guess what? That never happened either.
So the pivotal breakthrough that's necessary, that some company has to come up with to make life multiplanetary is a fully and rapidly reusable orbit-class rocket.
And of course, Musk goes on to say that the Falcon 9 was going to be fully and rapidly reusable.
We have a design that, on paper, doing the calculations, doing the simulations, it does work. It will show you a simulation of what we plan to do. Now that simulation is mostly accurate.
Except rather than being fully and rapidly reusable, it wasn't rapidly reusable. And it wasn't fully reusable either. In the second stage, they never recovered that. And the Dragon capsule, of course, was going to be propulsively landed like this. Thanks to all that great iterative design that SpaceX does.
Oh, and we're going to try to send something to Mars on every Mars rendezvous from here on out. So Dragon 2, which is a propulsive lander, we plan to send to Mars in a couple of years. And then do probably another Dragon mission in 2020. In fact, we want to establish a steady cadence that there's always a flight leaving, like it's a train leaving the station.
And they did kind of deliver a steady cadence in that 2018, they sent no missions to Mars. And in 2020, they sent no missions to Mars. And in 2022, they sent no missions to Mars. And in 2024, they have no plans of sending anything to Mars. And if you're holding your hopes out for 2026, I think they've established their steady cadence. And after all that iterative design of failures, the propulsively landed Dragon capsule was a great success. Right? Nope, after 5 or so years, they just cancelled it. Look, with the current rate of progress on the Starship, they will be bankrupt long before they ever get to a working system.
And I think that's somewhat necessary because obviously if the amount of money going out exceeds the amount of money coming in, then sooner or later we'll die.
You know, Musk says they're blowing about $2 billion a year on the Starship program.
And the cost of all this, like, I guess how much do you expect to spend on all that either this year or before you start flying real payloads?
Well, it's probably be a couple $1 billion this year, $2 billion-ish.
That's currently making about 2 rockets per year. So they're about $1 billion a shot, these things. They're basically the same cost as the Artemis missions. Except, of course, the Artemis missions worked. Not in just getting to orbit, but going around the moon. And all of these rockets that Musk has blow up aren't earning the company any money. Now, Musk, of course, said after the first rocket blew up that the company was in a really good financial position and didn't need to raise cash.
And there's a kind of a struggle by other companies to raise funds lately for a number of reasons, and SpaceX has usually kind of been insulated from that. But do you see any kind of difference nowadays? Is SpaceX kind of thinking about fundraising differently, and does that affect how, the pressure on this Starship program at all?
We do not anticipate needing to raise funding. No, we don't think we need to raise funding.
Until, of course, a few months later, they realized, actually, yeah, we desperately need more money. And now they've just cemented the idea that SpaceX is literally a money-burning party, where they've thus far burned $10-odd billion of investor money by saying that next year they want to raise another $1 billion or so off investors. Now, Musk did put in $100 or so million to start SpaceX, but of the $10 or so billion of investor money that it's burned, that means that only 1% of it was ever actually Elon Musk's money. Musk is an expert in spending other people's money. Musk is rich on paper like Sam Bankman-Fried and Elizabeth Holmes were rich. Not because they ever actually earned any money, but because people thought they had something valuable in the mystery box. And because someone's bound to say, but Musk is the richest man on the planet, he could easily afford all of this. After all, he lost $20 billion buying Twitter. This is nothing compared to that. Yeah, the argument is so self-defeating it's difficult to know where to begin. I mean, let's just start with, if he's so rich, why did he need to borrow $1 billion from SpaceX? And why would he keep needing funding rounds to spend other people's money if he really was that rich? But whatever, let's say based on how long it took him to get the Falcon 9 kind of working as a partially reusable system, that it takes him twice as long to get the Starship working. About 10 years or so. And at the current rate of cash burn, that's going to be about $20 billion. And if you think those numbers are crazy, Musk reckons that it's going to cost $5 to $10 billion. And Reality called and said in a recent court filing that they've already spent $5 billion trying to get Starship working. And if you think that this is halfway to being able to fly as safely and as regularly as a commercial jet...
But we really need to get to rapidly and completely reusable rockets, just as is the case with aircraft. I mean, aircraft are rapidly and completely reusable. Land a 747 and take off, an hour and a half later. And you should be able to do that with rockets too.
I've got a bridge to sell you.
All word. Reusability, we don't believe it really counts unless you can turn it around as rapidly or almost as rapidly as you turn around an aircraft. Basically you land the system, you land the stage, you do some brief but important critical checks and inspections, you refuel and you re-go. So our challenge right now is to refly a rocket within 24 hours. So that's when we'll really feel like we got the reusability piece right.
Awesome.
And of course, Vaporware Man was out there promising that they would have a relaunch within 24 hours using the same booster, no later than next year. It will, of course, surprise precisely no one at this point that that goal wasn't met. Indeed, it's never been met. The fastest reuse of one of their Falcon 9 boosters is about a month, only somewhat faster than the fastest reflight of the shuttle. And that was after about a decade of trying. And even if you just take those numbers and apply them directly to the Super Heavy, it won't because there's more engines, but whatever, let's say it can fly once per month. Merely to fuel up the Starship to get it from low Earth orbit to the moon will take, high teens numbers of refueling flights. So that's somewhat over a year before you can test any of the lunar mission stuff. And another year before you can actually put people on it. And that's even if it worked flawlessly now. In reality, it's got about 3 times as many engines as the Falcon 9, so the reflight time will most likely be 3 times slower. So even if you use those as brackets for getting back to the moon, even if the system was fully functional now, it would take somewhere between 2 to 6 years. And not to labour the point, but this is nowhere near a functional system. And even if, like the Falcon booster, they can eventually make part of it kind of reusable, well, it took them about 5 years to get that sort of working-ish. So 10 years with the Super Heavy? Well, great. So let's say after 10 years and $20 billion, they can now make good on fulfilling the NASA contract for $3 billion. And then go on to make a profit, right? Except no. The launch market is tiny compared to these development costs. Elon Musk talks about going to Mars, so let's see what the launch costs for going to Mars are like. For, say, for instance, the Perseverance rover, which was an amazing success. Mission costs about $2.5 billion. Launch costs about $250 million. So roughly 10% of the mission costs were the launch costs. It's almost like there's more to space exploration than just building big rockets. And that pattern's seen with most of the satellite launches, where the cost of the satellite dwarfs the launch costs. Take, for instance, the Amos 6 satellite, which famously blew up on top of a SpaceX rocket. Cost of building the satellite, about $200 million. Launch costs, about a quarter of that. And only a fraction of that would have actually been profits for SpaceX. So, 10 odd million per flight or something. The bottom line is, there isn't a lot of money to be made by launching satellites. They can never make back these development costs. Basically, even if this thing works, it's a bridge to absolutely nowhere. You only have to contrast how Musk sold going to Mars in 2017 compared to 2022.
I mean, in order to make it appealing and increase that portion of the Venn diagram of people who actually want to go, it's got to be really fun and exciting, and it can't feel cramped or boring. So the crew compartment or the occupant compartment is set up so that you can do zero-G games, you can float around. There'll be like movies, lecture halls, cabins, a restaurant. It'll be like really fun to go.
Excellent. I mean, that's a functioning sales pitch to turn space travel for something that's difficult, hard, will probably kill you, into basically a cruise on a luxury liner where there will be restaurants and zero-G games. That is something that people might pay for, because people won't fork out hundreds of millions of dollars to spend their lives in conditions worse than you would get in a supermax prison. And Musk hits the nail right on the head when he says it can't be cramped, because the entire business model would blow up harder than a Starship on its maiden voyage if it were. If the trip to Mars was cramped and difficult, Starship would be in a no-win condition. It's like trying to build a house out of burning wood. If the conditions were cramped and difficult, Starship would officially become the chocolate frying pan of rockets, built for a market that doesn't exist. Sorry, what's that? Musk has updated his opinion of what the trip to Mars will be like.
It can't feel cramped or boring. So, sales pitch for going to Mars is that it's going to be cramped. Occupant compartment is set up so that you can do zero-G games, you can float around. There'll be like movies, lecture halls, dangerous, difficult, very hard work. And like I said, I'm an optimist. You might die, and That's the sales pitch. Cabins, a restaurant. It'll be like really fun.
Smithers, I'm beginning to think that Homer Simpson was not the brilliant tactician I thought he was.
So far from being some sort of escape hatch, it will be extremely difficult and dangerous and tough.
So why are we doing all of this? Why do we need a rocket this big, and why does it need to be reusable so quickly? And that answer goes back to SpaceX's mission, which is to make life multiplanetary.
We aren't just building a new spacecraft. We're changing what it means to go to space.
It's going to be cramped.
By building the most powerful rocket ever flown.
Dangerous, difficult, very hard work.
And a ship designed to carry people, cargo, habitats, satellites, and more.
And like I said, I'm an optimist.
We're unlocking a future where our dreams of exploration will
you might die.
No longer exceed our grasp. And this mission continues with flights like today's integrated test. Incredible views of our super heavy booster. And
that's the sales pitch.
Yeah, it would be like asking people to spend the rest of their lives in the hardest prison that you can imagine.
Think about someplace truly diabolical.
Triple max prison, and no daylight.
And expected them to pay you $200,000 for the privilege.
That was your whole plan.
Bear in mind, of course, that if there aren't hundreds of thousands of people willing to do this, then Elon Musk's entire plan for colonizing Mars is gone as well. There's no one who's going to go.
Don't know about this new crew of yours. They seem a bit skittish. Probably shouldn't tell them what happened in the last crew.
There is no market for going to Mars, except of course for that ever lucrative demographic who are super happy to pay tens of millions of dollars to spend the rest of their lives in a multiple occupancy supermax cell. In fact, psychologically it's far worse than a supermax prison, because at least there you have a chance of being released and going out and enjoying the grass under your toes and the wind in your hair. Once you go to Mars, you will never go outside again. The people who go to Mars will be stuck in that prison cell for the rest of their lives. We just need a few billion more dollars to build a rocket to take people there. And if that sounds like a great business venture that you would like to invest in, I've got some great news for you. And SpaceX will happily take your money at the next investment round. Now, at this point, someone's going to say in the comments, but Elon Musk never said that we dug our own grave with Starship. No, not yet. But he will. He will. Woof! And that was today's video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, maybe give it a thumbs up. If you really enjoyed it, maybe consider supporting through Patreon. After all, your money's going to do a lot better good there than it will blowing up $1 billion or so of investor and taxpayer money over the Gulf of Mexico. And as ever, thanks for watching.